Sat Sri Akal, Namaste, Adab to everyone who has turned up promptly. But as I've been saying in all these lives, we know that Asians tend to be fashionably late, so we'll give it a few more minutes to let the others arrive and also to wait for Jawala to come online as well. So give it a minute or two. But while you guys are waiting, just to remind you of this live conversation, it is about, we're discussing quite a few things, but namely this book, 54 Punjabi Proverbs. I know it's not reading correctly for you guys, but you get the gist. This is the book, and it was so it's a book of Punjabi wisdom passed down through the generations, written by Jawala Singh, and he released this last year, 2019, and Jawala and myself, we were invited on to the Sunny and Shay show to talk about this book, and we spoke about many things: Cockney rhyming slang, the origin of proverbs and idioms. So this discussion, we're going to touch on this book. We're also going to touch on Jawala's research that he's doing as a PhD student on poetic and literary devices, where he aims to translate some of the most important theological and historical Sikh texts. So a lot to do in an hour. I'll give it another minute or so. I'm just going to read actually while I wait. I can't see that Jawala's here. Oh, sorry, a few house rules. So I will disable the comments while we are having our conversation. Just allows us to have an unfiltered conversation without distraction. And then at the end, so I usually give about 15 to 20 minutes, I will enable the comments, and then if you have any questions or feedback, then by all means please do share them. And while the comments are disengaged or disabled, you can still put them in the comments box, and when I enable them they will appear. Or you can wait until the end after the discussion and see if there's anything particular based on what we've spoken about that you would like to offer feedback or commentary on. Can't see that Jawala's here. What's the exact time? 7:33. I usually give it till about 7:35, but for those of you that have arrived on time, thought I would just read. If you are not familiar with this book, it is sold out in the UK. However, I know Jawala has an announcement that he wants to make, so I'll let him share that. It did really well actually in the UK. I'm not sure about the other countries, but yeah, it's such a great book. We'll discuss it with Jawala in how it's quite a simple book. I'll just show you if you don't have it already. You know, it's quite simple. It's got the Punjabi proverb, and then translation and transliteration. So, and there's 54 of them as well. And it's just such a simple book in that sense. But it had the ability to connect people, the diaspora namely, with their grandparents and their parents, and it was just lovely because this one proverb, just this one line or these few words, were able to just evoke memories of their parents or grandparents' childhood, which is really wonderful in an age and generation where we're disconnecting with our elders and they're becoming more and more invisible and marginalized. Such a simple book had the ability to connect. Okay, Jawala, if you're here, can you wave? Because it is 7:35 now. I'll wait for him. Live is showing reverse. Yes, I know it's showing the reverse, but like I said, it's just to gauge. This is the book with the Fulgari images. This is what you can look out for on Amazon. Let's invite Jawala. He might be here. I was going to read an intro. Let me see if he's here. Not here yet. Oh, he's here now. Okay, great. All right, Jawala. So I'm just going to do an introduction, which I've been doing for all of the guests. And it's tailored to each person. Once I've done the introduction, then I'll invite Jawala. So at this point, I'm going to disengage the comments, but please do save your questions for the end, where we'll have a chance to ask questions or provide commentary and feedback. So for those of you that don't know who Jawaharlal Singh is, Jawaharlal Singh is a lawyer, PhD student, and creator of Mangalacharan.com, as well as author of 54 Punjabi proverbs, which we will be discussing. His research work embodies translations of important theological and historical Sikh texts, such as the Suraj Prakash Granth. Earlier this year, at the start of lockdown, Jawaharlal Singh released the Suraj podcast, in which he provides short summaries of the chapters within the monumental historical text, the Gur Pratap Suraj Prakash Granth. I can't say that word. Written in 1843, written by the great poet Kavi Santokh Singh. The podcast has been received with much admiration from listeners all over the world who've been captivated by Jawaharlal's English commentary and narration on this less known but very valuable text, in which he covers chapter by chapter the stories of the Suraj Prakash Granth, first relating to Guru Har Gobind, and specifically starting at when Bidhi Chand sets off to steal 2 horses from the Lahore fort. So that's just a little summary of what it's about. The podcast is available to listen to on SoundCloud and Spotify, and personally it was the highlight of my lockdown period. It ends on these cliffhangers, and it's like Netflix. You can't stop at that one episode. You have to carry on listening to it. It's so good, and I guess that's the mark of a good storyteller as well. His blog Mangalacharan also provides English translations of passages from important Sikh historical texts. Mangalacharan exists to serve as an unfiltered resource through which one can access the treasure trove of knowledge passed down by our ancestors, which has not yet been translated into English. For the past decade, Mangalacharan has provided translations of passages from various scriptures within the Sikh tradition, namely from Sarablo Granth, the Dasam Granth, Gobind Gita by Guru Gobind Singh, Kabit Savaiye by Bhai Gurdas Ji, and Bansavli Nama by Kesar Singh Chibbar. In 2019, Jawaharlal Singh published 54 Punjabi proverbs, which is now an Amazon bestseller. This is the first English translation of some popular and less known kahawats, or proverbs, of the Punjabi language. We will be discussing the origins of this publication this evening and exploring aspects of poetic and literary devices used in Punjabi language. So let's see what Jawaharlal makes of my intro. I'm right here now. Is that all right?
Hey, how's it going?
Is that decent intro? Yeah, I've tried to, everything.
Yeah, so how's it going? It's quite a long intro.
I know. I've spent a lot of time tailoring this to individual people, and I hope that came across for those people that aren't familiar with you. And the aim is that they go and research you, and obviously after this conversation, hopefully they're inspired to do that as well. So when you're ready,
Yep.
we're going to start off with. There's quite a few of you I saw who had joined who have been participating in this South Asian Heritage Month UK series. So you'll be familiar with the format, which is we start with rapid fire round questions, which is just an icebreaker. And it's essentially just a way to, get to know you, Jawaharlal, the person. So let's start. As a researcher, you have to be an avid reader. So which 3 books would you take with you on a desert island?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah,
A
even
lot
I
of
wouldn't be able to answer.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with, what I'm currently researching. But I think something that I would take with me would be the Suraj Prakash, on account of it's like gigantic and enormous, and you could be on that island for like 1,000 years and you wouldn't get through it. About
You probably just need that one. That would be enough, right? You probably don't need the other 2.
probably be enough. Um, for fun reading, I like Herman Hesse. He's a great writer. Um, but honestly, because my work is so ingrained, right now reading the type of material I need for my research, I would kind of go Suraj Prakash. There's some other great books I'm reading right now. I have it right under my phone. Anybody who's interested in like the history of India, this is definitely a great book. India and the Persianate Age, by Richard Eaton. definitely check that book out. It'll give you a lot of context to um, basically how the Persians, or basically what Turks are as well, the whole
Mhm.
Mughal Empire, the context around that. Definitely a good
Mhm. Okay, yeah. But I think it's fair to say, Suraj Prakash, that'll be enough, like you said.
read.
Okay. Which three historical figures, living or dead, would you invite to your dinner party?
Sorry, I my phone. Which three?
Historical figures, living or dead. I know that's really vague, but I'm leaving that to your imagination. Three historical figures, um, living or dead. Well, that doesn't make sense, obviously. If they're living, they wouldn't be historical, but you get what I'm trying to ask you.
This is not so rapid fire. So sorry. Three historical figures that what?
Let's make it rapid. Three historical figures. Name three off the top of your head.
Oh, that I like. Oh, okay. Well, since we mentioned Suraj Prakash, I go Santokh Singh. I
Mm-hmm.
would go. Um, I would go Aurangzeb because I was reading this Persianate book, and then I would go. Ooh, just off the top of my head, I don't know, like Fulla Singh Akali,
Wow,
1800s.
what a
Yeah.
table that would be. That would be a table, wouldn't it, to be at? Your favorite proverb in English and favorite proverb in Punjabi.
Ooh, in English.
Mhm.
I guess in Punjabi it's easy one. Akalam bajo khu khali. So akalam bajo without akal, without any type of intellect or skill. Khu khali, the well is always empty.
Mm.
Um, it's kind of a harsh one, I guess, but it kind of illustrates for me to put my effort and I guess my focus into my work. Because without like really digging deep, without trying to use your brains, and we're all educated here in the West, we could do a lot with the material that we have.
Mm.
Without that, the well is always empty. So regardless of how deep that well is, like if you think about it, we have the deepest well ever known that's ever been accessible for people. As if
Mm.
at this point of our lives right now, we have so much access to literature, to writing, even to knowledge about how to decode some of these writings. So, I mean, the resources that we do have is like it's limitless when you compare it to what people used to have. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of we want to dig deep and kind of engage with it. I would say that's my favorite Punjabi. It's one my grandfather used to use a lot.
Mm.
My Punjabi. In
What about
English, in English, off the top of my head, I would go something like, a tiger never changes its stripes. I know there's a Punjabi equivalent that I have of
yeah?
that, but
Well,
a cautionary proverb. But
okay.
yeah.
We'll go into that because we're obviously going to discuss your book. And finally, which language do you dream in?
Oh, English for sure. Yeah. Growing up, English was I definitely. I mean, my parents spoke in Punjabi, but I definitely was on in English. My English is definitely, I write in English, I work in English. A lot of the, emphasis for me to kind of go back into the literature was kind of reclaim that language.
Mm.
Um, it wasn't until I started living in India that I became more proficient in Punjabi.
Mm.
Um, and a lot of my youth, like when I was a teenager, I kind of have self-taught how to read, right? Before I got formal teaching in how to read. So definitely English is it's my stronger language.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so that bit is over. So hopefully you didn't feel any pressure, and now we can get into the flow of the conversation. But before we do that, I just wanted to establish the difference between a proverb and an idiom, because a lot of people, myself included, I never used to know what the difference was when I was a lot younger. But there is a difference. So a proverb is a saying that usually imparts wisdom. And an example of that would be an apple a day keeps the doctor away, which is one of my favorite ones because that's something my granddad, my nanaji used to say a lot, and I never understood what he was saying, and I was maybe 5 or 6. So that's something that's very dear to me. Too many cooks spoil the broth. and the pen is mightier than the sword. But on that one, too many cooks spoil the broth. There's something very similar in your book, page 50. Anyone who's got their book to hand, page 50 of 54 Punjabi proverbs. There is a Punjabi proverb very similar to too many cooks spoil the broth. Tija raliya kam galya. When a third person arrives, the task at hand deteriorates. And an idiom now is something which doesn't have any advice attached to it. It's just a phrase or an expression that is metaphorical but without any non-literal meaning. So an example of that would be, oh, it's a piece of cake, meaning that's really easy. Time to hit the sack, meaning to go to bed. Kill two birds with one stone. So obviously it's not literal things, but they're metaphors. So that's the difference. And in Punjabi, proverb is kahavat and idiom is muhavre.
You would also call proverb a khan as well. A khan?
Oh yeah, a khan as well. The other one, yeah. So let's get into this book then, 54 Punjabi Proverbs. Where did the idea stem from to research, collate and translate these? And then why 54? Because we know there's just a vast, treasure trove of these. How did you condense it to 54 and why did you select these ones? So the idea and why 54?
Yeah, I'll start with 54 first. I guess it kind of came down to how an Indian, or just anywhere in the West, 108 is very auspicious number. It holds some weight to it. It's kind of heavy, like philosophical, spiritual. And for this, we wanted it to be really lighthearted. We wanted it to be just fun, something you can toss around, making sure grandparents, something you can take, I don't know, to a family event. We didn't know there wouldn't be any family events this year, but it's something that you can kind of just have fun with, right? It's not something that's going to be thick. It's not something that's going to be a long read. So we kind of just went, okay, we should probably go 108. It's like the Eastern thing. And then from 108, we just cut it in half to make it kind of a more fun thing and just really have to deal with the science. But how I got started with the Proverbs was basically because of my translation work outside of Punjabi literature. When I was looking at a lot of Braj texts, you would come across these type of proverbs, and so that for me it became a big problem because when I was translating, and a lot of my work has to deal with translation, it became an issue of, okay, well, I can't translate this literally. If you do literally, it takes it out of context, right? So then what I decided to do was look at. So you can actually find in Punjabi like a Khankosh, like a dictionary of proverbs. And you can find this on Punjab Digital Library. There's other authors. At the top of my book, I reference an author who has made a book. It's actually by Bikram Singh Kumman. He's put a book out. He was a professor in Punjab. He put a book out on Punjabi as well. So there exists this literature, this quite a lot of books on this. But they're in Punjabi, and because of that, they're inaccessible to the people, like the youth in the West, right? So when I was trying to translate these, I started looking these up, and they were a lot of fun actually. So I started putting them online. People themselves gave me feedback. Other friends gave me feedback that these are great. I should compile these. And once we compiled, we put it in a book format, and then it just went from there. So basically, it came from this need to translate old text, and you'd find these proverbs in there. People use these proverbs. I've spoken about this before, where Guru Gobind Singh is using some of these proverbs in not only the Suraj Prakash but other historical texts. Guru Bilas Pashahi Dasmi, there's also reference to these type of proverbs being used by Guru Gobind Singh. So it just became a necessity for me for my work, and then. From that, I didn't know that it would be, such a fun thing that people could use with their family. People started throwing them around.
I was saying, I don't know if you caught the introduction. I was saying that it's such a simple look how thin it is, right? Not very dense at all, but and it's very simple in terms of its formatting as well. So the Punjabi proverb, translation, transliteration, but it had the ability to just connect people from different generations. And I think that's the beauty of language, and the fact that it was translated into English, because it's something that you said hadn't been translated to English before. And now we can understand it. This isn't a tongue that the diaspora can understand. And there's so much wisdom that, you know, that you can gain from this. And as I said earlier, the English proverb, too many cooks spoil broth, well, the Punjabi equivalent is here as well. So you can make those links. And it just, yeah, it became quite fun for people, isn't it? And the stories connected to their parents and grandparents. So I'm sure you didn't think about that when you were putting this book together. For you, as part of it was just connected to your research. But but look at the impact that it had on, you know, cross generations.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Language is so powerful like that.
The feedback I got, and for those who are watching this in UK, it's going to be available on UK Amazon in like a week or two. We're just getting that set up.
That was your special announcement.
We were supposed to do a special
announcement. Yeah, I said that you were going to do it. So that's the special announcement, that it's unavailable because it did so well. It sold out so quickly, but it's available this week now.
Yeah, it should be towards the end of this week, maybe early next week. For those who really want a reminder, just send me a message with your email, and I'll send out an email when it's available. Yeah, just we really hadn't anticipated the demand that. So stocking, you know, the books was an issue out in England, which is great. You know, we really appreciate the support. We really didn't understand the type of feedback that we would get. For example, like when people started taking these books home and saying it to their grandparents, I kind of didn't realize that these were very commonly said, even in like populations that were like not as educated, like my grandmothers were not educated. Yet a lot of these proverbs, they would be like, "Oh, your grandma used to say this a lot," and there would always be kind of like a funny story surrounding it.
Which one about your mum and dad, right? A story which has a proverb that contains a proverb about when your mum and dad met or got engaged, I think, right?
Yeah, basically when my grandparents on my mom's side went to go see, you know, my dad to see if he was a suitable match and all that typical arranged marriage style, you know, back in the late 70s in England. And you know, they went to go see him. They came back home. My mom wasn't there, so my grandparents are telling my mom, you know, what kind of man he is and stuff. And so my mom was asking, okay, like, how was he? And my grandfather, my Nanaji, was kind of making fun of my dad and my mom at the same time, saying something along the lines of, oh, well, you know, you would like him a lot because, you know, he kind of wears ripped jeans, as was the style. He wears ripped jeans like you, basically. My grandmother was kind of sticking up for my dad there, and my grandmother kind of chimed in saying, "Sherande mu to te nahi hunde." So like a tiger's face is never washed, and meaning like it doesn't matter. Like you know, a tiger is accomplished in all these other aspects. It doesn't need to like
be presentable. Yeah.
So you know, that kind of won my mom over, grandfather over, and then whatever, they got married next week. You know, so.
Yeah, no, but that is just so typical. Like you said, most of the people were illiterate. Women, they had these, you know, figuratively speaking, in their pockets, available at hand, right? They knew it was just part of their memory. And something I wanted to share, my personal story, growing up. So I'm one of 5 sisters, and I used to hear this one, which is in your book. It's on page 21, and I was really happy when I saw it there. I'd forgotten about this proverb, but again, like I said, it transported me back to my childhood. And my mom used to say this all the time when we used to say, "Oh, you favoritize one sister over the other," and you know, silly things we say as children. And she would give this response back. She'd say, "Hath diyan panje ungla ikko jiyan nahi hundiyan," meaning the 5 fingers of a hand are never all the same. And the translation here is, while one's fingers all work together to accomplish a task, they are of different sizes and strength. This proverb speaks to the need of recognizing diversity. So our mom would say that to us, and we'd think, why are you giving us these riddles? We don't understand. And she'd show us, she's like, you know, 5 things, they're not the same. I need all of them. I can't do without one of them. And that's something that came to her in trying to explain to us that we are all important to her. And when I showed my mom this book, she said, "Dekha, you remember I used to say this to you? It's not just me. This is what we all used to feel and say. And there's so many more like that. But and I'm sure, hopefully when I disable the comments, we can see other people that they can share their own personal stories and proverbs. But just want to move on now. You touched on the fact that proverbs, they're really important part of any language. You get African proverbs, Jewish proverbs. This is not something particular to English or Punjabi language, of course, right? But I just wanted to expand on Varis Shah, the author of the epic saga Heer, Varis Shah's Heer. And Varis Shah's Heer is a treasure trove of Punjabi phrases, idioms, and proverbs. If you've read it, but there are English translations available. And what's really important about a proverb, generally, a proverb gives you insight into a particular culture, right? And Varis Shah's Heer does that through his proverbs. So I've got a few here that I just wanted to share. They're not all in Punjabi because I couldn't find the Punjabi translation. But Varis Shah's Heer was written in the 1700s in Punjab. So it gives a very detailed depiction through the proverbs and the idioms and the sayings. It gives a very detailed depiction of life in Punjab in the 1700s, the social customs and norms, the social ills, the political situation, and the patriarchal society. And that is what most of the proverbs point to. So I'll give you a few examples here. There was one, this is an English translation. "Why have you cut off the nose of the family and covered us with disgrace?" This is a proverb that has been said to Heer, the female protagonist. "Why have you cut off the nose of the family and covered us with disgrace?" This is a famous Urdu Punjabi proverb. I couldn't get the Punjabi proverb, unfortunately. But what it means is you're dishonoring the family. That's essentially what it means. And again, like I said, the context, the backdrop of Varis Shah's Heer, it's written in a very patriarchal time. And women were seen as subordinate. They were seen as, a woman carries the honor of the family. So this is pointing to that. So we get an insight into that cultural situation. Another one, Varis Shah says, "Na adata jandiyan ne pave katiye poriyan poriyan ji," meaning a man never abandons his habits, even if he's hacked to pieces. That reminded me of a line in Gurbani, "Purja purja kat mare kaguna chade khet." Which I think, obviously, this is 1700s, so that might have been a proverb that existed in the Guru's times, and Varis Shah just adapted it. "Sis diya par sirar na diya," right? That's another one.
That's something I wanted to mention as well. In the one previously, this is something that I find so interesting, is that these idioms used across not only different languages, not only different communities, but different literary styles as well and genres. So, like you mentioned that one about getting cut up in different pieces. There's a line written by Guru Gobind Singh in Vichitra Natak where he says, "Sis par sir na diya." He's talking about his father there. When he was basically imprisoned by Aurangzeb, and Guru Gobind Singh describing, the imprisonment and kind of what happened there, says that, his father gave his head, "Sis diya, but sir na diya." He didn't give away this sir, the secret, because basically the context of that was Aurangzeb was saying, "Okay, if you perform a miracle, then I'll let you live. If you don't, you're going to be executed." And we know from historical writings contemporary of that time that this was something Aurangzeb was doing, was kind of going around to religious leaders that he thought were against his camp, basically, and basically executing them under this pretense, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, the point is Guru Gobind Singh used this line, this idiom that, one would give their head, wouldn't give like their inner knowledge, their inner secrets, their inner power, their inner ability, right? They would keep that to themselves. And Varis Shah uses the exact same idiom. He uses it in a different context. When he's using it some 50, 60 years later, this is something I'm going to post on my Twitter as well, kind of showing how the literature that we do have, like Gurbani that we do have, utilizes idioms, proverbs, literary styles, poetics of the time to convey something profound, right? But what Varashah is using, how he's using it, it's a context, it's a conversation back and forth between Ranja and Hir's sister or sister-in-law. And
Saiba
yeah,
is his.
and they're back and forth, and she is suspecting Ranja as, having this relationship with Hir, and
Mm,
basically just says that line. The line being that, a beloved would give it, but, rather than telling on like his beloved, like giving up that
mm,
secret of her. So we can see this idiom being used in a variety of different contexts, right?
yeah,
Across time as well as across literary styles. Obviously, they were not, of the same genre. But what is interesting is Guru Gobind Singh did write in a Kissa style genre.
yeah,
And the Tirtharopakyan is one of Guru Gobind Singh's largest compositions.
mm,
And that is
mm,
the Triya Chitra is literally a literary genre style
mm,
that has been before and after Guru Gobind Singh's version. So
yeah,
this is something that Guru Gobind Singh himself in those Charitas writes about Heath Ranja, writes about Mirza Sahib. Like there's a lot of different things that
mm.
he talks in there. There's 405 tales.
So amazing, right? Because these are, he's making references to that culture, to that time. So it's a no-brainer, right? That he's going to use these. If we think about the Guru Granth Sahib or any of the Granths, it's poetry. So of course they're going to encapsulate these literary and poetic devices, but we don't see it like that until you deconstruct and you know analyze it. You begin to see it, and this parallel that you made between the proverb in Varis Shah and how Guru Gobind Singh Ji used it. So beautiful. And I remember when you shared that with me, I was just like mind blown. I get excited over little things like that, especially with language. And I was just, it's just so beautiful because we see them as separate things. We see the Granth maybe as just a religious, which is not. It's a scriptural text, but that's how we see it. It's just dogma, and it's not that. But when you really look at it and examine it, you could just look at one line of Gurbani and take hours just understanding the poetry, which was something we're going to go on to actually with a particular chand of the Dastan Granth. But I just wanted to, and I'm glad you mentioned the Punjabi Kisse. That was actually one of my questions, that the Kissa is a very famous romantic tragedy genre. Like you mentioned, Mirza Saiba, Hi Ranja, Laila Majnu, Soni
Yeah,
Mahibal, Sipunu, and their inspiration is derived from Persian sources. And obviously Varshah, he is the most popular one of all of them. There's Kisapur and Bhagat as well. So
right.
and I'd love to talk on just these one day as well. But time is mocking us, so we will continue. Um, so there's something. So I was doing some research and I came across this researcher whose name is Lubna Akhlaq Khan, and she's done, I don't know if you're familiar with this, Jawala, but she's done a thesis on Punjabi proverbs and gender, the construction of multiple identities. I just wanted to have a conversation with you about this because there is something in your book, well, two things I think in your book, two references to people in terms of their gender identity and role. And what's really amazing, sorry, I just looking at my notes. We were talking about Gurbani. Just wanted to share some proverbs. Ape bij ape hi khao. In Japji side, like you say what you read, and Aaron mat ved hatiyar. These are like proverbs and idioms in Gurbani. There's so many more, but these are the two that I wanted to share. But what I would like to expand on, my favorite Bani is that of Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji. I know you shouldn't have a favorite, but I do. And I like the themes that he explores because he explores the transient nature of life. And that's something, there's a proverb that mentions the transient nature of life in here, which is on page 26, Khedden de din char, which you have there. Page 26, guys, if you have the book, I feel like a teacher now. Page 26, Khedden de din char. Play only lasts for 4 days. Play meaning life. Play is an analogy for life. That's it. And you've written here, Jawaharlal, this is a sobering proverb which speaks to the transient nature of happiness, only lasts for a short time. One should not try to hold on to such experience. I've heard this growing up. My mom used to say this, life is very short. And like I said, Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji's Bani echoes this a lot. Slok Mahalla Nama particularly, Beet Jeh Janam Akajre, which is not Slok Mahalla Nama. Baru ki peet jaise basuda ko raj hai, meaning that life is like a wall of sand. Like you try to hold on to it, and the tighter grip you try to have on sand, the quicker it slips away. Chin chin kar gayo kal taise jaat aaj hai. Life is slipping away moment by moment. One of my favorite ones from Slok Mahalla Noma, Sukh mein bahut sangi paye, dukh mein sang na koi. And in English, growing up, I heard, my family, my sisters, my mom, they would say, people are only there for you in times of happiness. They're not there for you in sadness. And I remember when I came across this in Slok Mahalla Noma, Sukh mein bahut sangi paye, dukh mein sang na koi, I was just overwhelmed that this was an observation that the Guru had made. And that is what the Guru Granth Sahib is, isn't it? It's not a rule book. There is wisdom, universal wisdom in there, such as this. Jag supana arpekhna, aise jag ko jaan. Understand, Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji saying to the mortal, understand that life is just a dream, right? Did you want to touch on that at all?
Yeah, it's actually something that's interesting. I find interesting a lot. Guru Har Gobind, he writes about this. Actually, if somebody wants to look at some historical references and good historical books, there's one by J.S. Grewal, and I forget the co-author's name off the top of my head. It's called Sikh History from Persian Sources. It actually mentions who goes and visits Guru Har Gobind, and he questions Guru Har Gobind, okay, what do you think, like, basically, what is the core of the religious belief? How do you see the world? And he gives this answer that, life is like a dream and reality is, and, obviously Guru Tegh Bahadur is the youngest out of Guru Har Gobind's family. It's his son, right? So he also conveyed that to Guru Tegh Bahadur. Guru Tegh Bahadur was writing this. And yeah, I mean, it's an idea that stems all the way back in Indian philosophy for a long time. The concept of the world is like a dream, and it's transient, and even though actually there's a lot of if you go on Mangalacharna as well, there's some passages I translate that give context to this about stories about Guru Har Gobind talking about this idea. But yeah, I mean, it's a very, very common idea, conception about the world being transient and not to be caught up in it, and because it vanishes quite quickly. There's like deeper meanings. If you want to go even deeper, not that the world is just transient, but also the idea about what is the self. So when you think about a dream, what's happening in a dream? You are manifesting the dream, right? You yourself are creating this dream while you are the actor in the dream. Like you have created the entire environment, right? And you've situated yourself in that dream, not knowing that you've created that entire environment, not knowing that you're actually subconsciously creating the other people in that environment, orchestrating what they're saying is. But in that dream, you don't think you're doing that. You don't realize that you are creating that. Right? You don't realize that speaking to you, that person is also you. Like you've created that, right? In that way, it is also an analogy about the conception of the world as well. Like there's an in Sikh philosophy as well as other philosophies, there's the idea that what is underneath us, what we are all standing upon, the Adhishtan stratum of the entire world is this one, one being, this one energy, right? And we will emerge basically, right? And we are like the of an ocean, right? But that ocean is all one, right? So, and there's different layers you can take this analogy and kind of look at it and have fun with it. But it's the construct that's utilized a lot in Gurbani, this idea that, that 4 days as well. Four is a very interesting number that people in Punjab use, like, char akar par ke, right? They say that as well, like, oh, you read only four letters and you think you're like, such a great scholar. It's something
Oh,
that's
yeah,
good.
yeah. Bulleh Shah says that as well. One of his Kafis, I can't remember, but yeah, it's very similar to what you just said there. Yeah, and four and five. Five is always very symbolic of a peer or like the Panch Pyare as well. So there's something there. Maybe we can explore the numbers another time. Not something I'm an expert on, but just continuing with the theme of gendered proverbs. Page 29 of your book. Page 29. Changa putter ikko sujag ki Changa putter ikko sujag ki karna gadyan da vag. Having one good son is equivalent to a sacrifice, as in very valuable. What is any use of having a herd of donkeys? This proverb is said to explain to listeners the importance of quality, i.e., one good son, over quantity. So I just want to bring it back to Lubna's thesis, where she's exploring gendered proverbs. And there's this idea that Punjabi proverbs, you can sort of break them down into gender roles. So a man is typically viewed in a very positive, very good light, whereas a woman is generally viewed as insignificant and very subordinate and villainous sometimes as well. So I just want to give a few examples. So this one in your book is hailing the son, and the son is someone that is hailed, as is the father. But if we look at, I think you have one here about father as well. Yes, page 20 about the dad. I'll just give that example before I move on. So chacha ik pyo, so daru ik kyo. 100 uncles are worth one father, 100 bottles of alcohol are worth one of ghee. A classical Punjabi sentiment regarding the priceless value of both the father and ghee. So Lubna has also spoken about this, and she says that when we look at women are sort of portrayed in various lights according to their gender roles. So a mother is always held in high regard. Mama Tandiya Chama. There's one about similar to a verse in the Quran where Jannat or heaven lies at the feet of the mother, whereas a mother-in-law is never portrayed in a good light, which is that speaks of the cultural situation, which is still very relevant, right? Sastati nukapati, meaning if the mother-in-law is fiery, the daughter-in-law is equally she's gonna bite back, basically. And there were just a few that I wanted to go over. So women generally are portrayed as quarrelsome, they're portrayed as unintelligent, and just like a trophy wife. Aurta kara diya daulta. Just treasures to be kept at home. And wives are typically seen as troublemakers and cause of grief and worries. Navi jutti, navi ran, dove dukh dendene. A new wife and a new shoe both irritate. And the English sort of equivalent would be, like, oh, the old ball and chain, right? You never really associate that in a good light. And when someone's getting married, that's what we say. We say, oh, the old ball and chain. This is the Punjabi or Urdu equivalent to that. Then we've got a bride, a daughter-in-law. She's seen as evil, who needs to work hard to please her in-laws. Mothers, again, mama de pera het jannat hai. Ma razi ta rab razi. If you please your mom, it's akin to the pleasure of God. Mothers are given importance because obviously the ability to procreate, but a mother-in-law, she's presented in a completely face-threatening manner. So these are just a few examples that I wanted to share. And a daughter is seen in a very good light, whereas a daughter-in-law is not seen in a good light. And this is just very typical of, not typical, but I guess it just sheds light on the patriarchal society in which these were probably constructed, which brings me on to our next question. How do you think proverbs circulate? And is there space for new proverbs to come into our culture? How does a proverb stick or establish itself? Just a few minutes on that, and then we can move on to 8:15 already. Wow. I want to just touch on the Guru Granth Sahib, Dasam Granth, and then questions.
Yeah, just to kind of talk about some of the points you were making before. We do have to understand where proverbs come from, how they arise, how they get used. And we do have to be mature in understanding that there are portions of our culture that are not good, you know, and we understand this, right? The idea from the book was to present some of the gold, you know, that is circulated, you know, amongst our culture. Because we do have a lot of gold. We do have a lot of good, you know, very wise sayings, principles, virtues, you know, points to be, you know, cautious when engaging with life. There's a lot of good, right? And alongside of it, you know, there's a lot of bad proverbs as well that get circulated. So in the book, when I did a talk with Amandeep Madra, he was trying to get me to say some proverbs that didn't make the cut. But to be honest, I really didn't want to give those any light anyways. I mean, people who want to see some of that stuff, they can look to the Punjabi proverb dictionaries and kind of go through them. There are proverbs that get circulated because, you know, a large portion of the community uses them. That doesn't mean they're great, but, you know, that speak to, you know, caste disparity, speak to caste social structures, you know, about Jats perhaps, about other castes as well, Brahmins, that speak negatively about women. There are these, you know, just like in every culture, there's good and bad as well, right? And, you know, a lot of, just because a saying gets circulated by a lot of people, you know, does that mean that that's a good saying, you know? Of course not. But what I did in my book is I kind of dug my hand in all these proverbs and I took out the ones that I thought I liked and thought I wanted to share. And I thought that it would be good to have these go forward with the community and the culture. You know, in cultures and in society, there's always an up and down. You know, values gain prominence and then they, you know, lose prominence. And, you know, cultures go from being progressive to being conservative. And, you know, sometimes the demons in the culture, they get nurtured and they become bigger and, you know, they die out. So it's natural to see these when you look at Punjabi proverbs, say that, okay, you know, met some proverbs and they speak negatively towards women. Does that mean all of Punjabi culture is negative and bad? Of course. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
and just like ourselves, you know, we can look at culture just like that as well. We have many negative traits, negative habits, negative ideas, negative perceptions that we work of and that we are constantly trying to overcome. And, you know, we shouldn't ignore those. But if we're trying to put our best foot forward and trying to preserve some of the gold in the past, yeah, I did not include those type of proverbs. But you're right, there are some, like when you mention some of those, there's some good proverbs in there. Like I'm remembering when Guru Tegh Bahadur leaves Amritsar and he's not treated very well by Tir Mal and these people that were controlling the Darbar Sahib at that time. The women of the city took care of him. And there's a line he's noted in saying, Maya Rab Rajaya. You know, like mothers are like comforting quotes, basically, right?
Yeah.
For anybody that wants to look that up, that's in Satugali Taksal Steek of Guru Granth Sahib. I'll post that actually on my story for you guys. But yeah, so there's, you know, there's good proverbs and there's bad proverbs and all alike. And yeah, how they become used, how they get utilized is honestly just the fact that a lot of people use them. You know, they find it useful, like these proverbs that
word of mouth, right?
Yeah, you know, and it's just kind of like myth as well. Like what myth? I find proverbs interesting because they are like myths in a way. They're a way to package an idea, a principle, a virtue, a value, and in an interesting and in a fun and a playful and in a way that engages with memory, is so that people can utilize it, right? Whereas people might look at mythology to say, oh, of course this didn't happen. Well, you know, they're looking at it superficially. And underneath that, there's a point of value. There's a virtue there. There's something to tell you. So that's why I find it so interesting. But sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm just conscious of time. If anyone has any questions, I mean, we wanted to go into the Gurbani, but if you have questions, please share them. Otherwise, I will ask my questions. But yeah, we've got 10 minutes. Oh, okay. Mohan Saab. Sarfa karke sutti atta. Okay, this needs to be in Punjabi. Sarfa karke sutti atta khagiye kut. Oh no, okay, I'm not reading that out loud. I think that's rude. There's a atta. Okay, yeah, this is definitely a bit inappropriate, so I'm not going to read that out loud. But it's there if you want to read it. Two proverbs, but yeah, okay. Thank you for that contribution, Sunny. So I just wanted to talk about the sort of poetic devices in Gurbani for the next 5 minutes, really. I would love to continue. I mean, we'll see how it goes, but yeah, 8:30 is the cut-off time. We need to do another one, part 2. Question. Muhavre and Akhan both were my favorite topics in Punjab school textbooks. Do you use them also for research? Thank you, Harvade, for that question.
So I got this message as well that, in Punjab, they do still teach these, and that's fine. My audience really wasn't for people living in Punjab. Like, a lot of them still use these proverbs, commonly. And it's good that they're teaching them in schools, and they're carrying it forward. This book was simply for people in the West who didn't understand. Like, a lot of people my age, growing up with, they might understand the words in Punjabi. They're like, but when they try to piece that together, they don't understand what that means. So a lot of it was during the context and putting that into English for people that were not proficient in Punjabi to the extent that they understood what proverbs were in Punjab. So, but yeah, people do in Punjab. People are taught this, and people still use them.
Thank you. And Sunny just clarified it's using Gutti as a dog, but not swearing. Thank you, Sunny, for that. My question, Javala, something I did want to explore was, so I recently shared a chand, Uchang Priyat chand, verse from Das Granth, which is Jagardang Nagardang Bagardang Baje. And I just wanted to touch on this because you shared something. I thought it was unique to Guru Gobind Singh, but of course, a lot of these things are not unique, just like how rags have been borrowed from Hindustani classical music, with the exception of Jai Javanti that I know from the top of my head. Well, no, but that's Jai Javanti in Hindustani classical music. The same way dohiras, they existed. Kabir used dohas, which are pretty much the same thing. And Jagardang Nagardang I love because it uses onomatopoeia and alliteration. I love the way it just rolls off the tongue. Jagardang Nagardang Bagardang Baje Gagardang Gaji Mahagaje Gaje. I'm going to read it so people understand. They can see the alliteration and onomatopoeia. Gagardang Kati Katari Kadakan Tagardang Tiram to Pakang Kadakan Sagardang Surang Kagardang Kopang Pagardang Parmang Ranang Pagropang Sagardang Sastrang Chagardang Chare Bagardang Veering Dagardang Dakare. I love saying that. I love the way this rolls off my tongue, and you can hear and see the onomatopoeia, alliteration, and it's evoking that martial spirit. But you shared something recently on Instagram that this is very typical of war poetry. If you just want, I'd let you expand on that.
Yeah, so Guru Gobind Singh is writing in Braj meters there. That's Bhajang Priyat Chand is like a meter that has, a certain construction, which I go into. And basically, we got a big comment there as well. But basically, in regard to that, these, like the type of chands and the type of, devices that Guru Gobind Singh were using, like people had used it before. It's in Rama Charitamanas by Tulsidas. It's in other texts. Mean that, takes away from Guru Gobind Singh's writings. Guru Gobind Singh was writing in a style that people, if they heard it, they could understand. But, he was writing it so exquisitely. He was so good at it. He was so proficient in writing in that style that he was jumping into different genres of writing, and he was excelling in different genres of writing. That was a particular genre of poetry that people had written before, and people have written after as well, right? But my research into that is to understand the writings of Guru Gobind Singh. You also have to understand the context of, from where, those writings came from, right? Like what's surrounding it, who are writing in that style, how are they writing in meter, and then comparing it, because obviously any type of comparison naturally includes like it should include examination of other writing, like who else is writing in that style, how are they writing it, but like that style of writing of war poetry where you're using all these different literary devices, and this is something that I post about regularly now about poetics. Guru Gobind Singh was writing it not only in Raj, he was writing it in Punjabi, Chandi Diwar is written in Punjabi. He was writing, if you look in the world, there's like Rekhta as well, which is like, Parsi, and then school Urdu poetry. He's writing across languages, across literary styles, across genres, and excelling in all of those, which is proof to the pudding is why did these texts retain so much importance over time? Why did these texts have that pull? And I think when you jump into understanding the context, then you get a better idea about, oh, this is why this is so amazing. People did write in the past like that, and people did write in the future like that. But by examining both of those sides, you can kind of get a clearer insight as to why that poetry is so amazing, right? Like why it invokes such a martial spirit, and the proof is in the pudding when you see how did he get so many people to rebel, right?
Exactly. Just going to ask you, Giovanna, there's a few more questions we've got here, a few more questions I wanted to ask. If I end this live here and restart it, are you able to continue for another 20 minutes? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, because I want to save this live, so I'm just going to end it now, so I can share it to my Instagram live. I don't want it to cut out like it normally does. So if you can rejoin in 30 seconds and we'll continue. And for those that have asked these questions, if you have the time, please could you rejoin and share the questions there, because we could go on talking for such a long time, and I want everyone to have the opportunity to ask their questions as well. So obviously 1 hour doesn't do this conversation justice. I'll end it now, but please rejoin in about a minute or so. See you on the other side.